Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast this week. We are so excited to have Robyn Robertson with us from the Honey, I'm Homeschooling podcast. And Robyn, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thank you for having me. I am, as you heard, I'm the creator and founder of the podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. But most importantly, I'm a parent. I'm a mom to two kids who are teenagers at this moment. And really I guess my life is pretty well consumed with the ideas around learning and education. So we are an unschooling family. We have been following our own unique learning journey for about 10 years and counting, well, over 10 years now. We started out as world schoolers, really, and wanting something different. But along the way before that, I've worked in private education. My background is actually in international management and marketing. And then through these years of home educating, I have also a public school board trustee as well. So I've worked on different ends of governance and then just directly with community, supporting families to see how they can see the opportunities in their learning life and their own unique educational journeys. And then really, my main priority is my family and creating our own learning life together as well. So
I love that. So you mentioned the term unschooling, and I'm sure there are families out there who are like, what the heck is that? So do you want to tell us a little bit about what unschooling is? What does it entail? For those that may have never heard the term before.
Yeah, absolutely. So unschooling, I think really there's a big misunderstanding with unschooling, especially now as it's become a more of a well-known word or term. I think many think it means like it's unschooling, it's everything, unparenting, just, no holds bars. The kids are just going crazy and you're just doing whatever you want and you don't live a life together kind of thing. It's just like life on your own. Really for us, unschooling means that we are living a life without the traditional structure of school. So really we're learning and living that looks like our daily life. And unschooling, when we're thinking about it in the school terms, I think that's what so many think about is, but how do they learn without classes or teachers? Unschooling is really when the learner chooses the how, what, where, and when of their learning. And it's really their why that drives it instead of someone else's why. So unschooling is supporting our learners in that how, what, where, and when. That usually means that as a parent, I am a chauffeur, I am a resource collector, I am a listener, I'm a support, maybe I'm an information giver, maybe I am a teacher role if I have certain knowledge and experience in something that they want to get better at or learn more. I am a connector. But the biggest part of unschooling, I think, is that gets missed because our learning life or our schedule looks different from the traditional path. We have a lot of time together. So the biggest focus of unschooling is you're supporting the learner by creating a connection of the relationship. So I think that's what's missed in the unschooling. It's not people think, oh, it's unparenting and it's a free for all. It's actually being very connected. Because in order to support a learner who's choosing the how, what, where, and when, and following their why, there you need to really have an understanding, but also a connection, a place where you create an environment where you're working together so that everyone feels safe, so they can try new things, they can ask questions, they can make mistakes, and they feel safe making mistakes as they know that this is part of the journey. And they're not going to be shamed or shunned. They are going to be encouraged to keep trying and to keep asking. Another part of that is really building on that connection so that that relatedness, that relationship. So those mistakes and those questions, those try and continue. And as well, giving space or having space to practice, to do those things, to live in the experience and learn that way as well. So that's what unschooling means for us.
I love that. That's so awesome. And something that you kind of kept focusing on was like that connectedness, relationship-based aspect of learning. which is something that we're huge on at Mountain Point Academy as well, right? Even though we are an online program, we're like, it doesn't have to mean disconnected learning, right? You can have someone who is on your side, walking you through those failures, those mistakes, the things, how you're learning, and knowing that it's also a safe space for you to know that, hey, this, my mentor has my back. You know,
Yeah.
I'm learning in a safe space, and we're all about the hands-on learning too. So I love that that's part of the unschooling nature of it, is just, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm going to learn a little bit more about this, because then it gives students and the learners that excitement of, hey, this, I'm invested in this. This is something I want to learn about. It's not being dictated or forced. It's, hey, I have a natural tendency to want to learn more about, you know, equine science. So I'm going to go work at a horse stable and I'm going to learn the things and just be fully immersed in it. So I think that's a powerful opportunity. And like you said, having that kind of untraditional schedule allows for that flexibility, which is something for us as well. We're like, yeah, do school for maybe 4 hours and then get out and live and go spend time with your family and do the things that you're wanting to do. Because really the truth is, learning is a lifelong process. It's not just you're going to learn this in school and then table it and you're done, right? It's, if we can foster that attitude now, it's just going to help them further to be good citizens and contributors in adulthood, right? And so how have you kind of seen that play out in the unschooling aspect, kind of fostering this attitude of lifelong learning for learners?
Well, I think, pretty well, it sums like what you said, because you have the time and the space to pursue learning or interests that you're really interested in, that you're not following someone else's schedule. It allows you to see that, life really is in the living every day and doing that, the experience. There's a lot of action, I think, doing in that process. And, you see that, here's the one. So one is, you're not confined in a separate classroom with people your own age. They're all doing the same thing apart from the real world. Often because, and I get, there's things nowadays like insurance limitations and schedules have to be followed, and work and union contracts that have to be recognized and honored. And sometimes it's just easier to keep kids contained in that classroom, in that schedule, because you have all of these other checklists and things to manage outside of the actual learning and outside of the actual child. So for a student, your containment, everyone else is doing that same thing every day, and you're often not part of the world that's happening outside of that. But with lifelong learning and self-direction and unschooling, what happens is you're removed from that containment. And so often your interest, maybe you're reading about it. Sorry.
Yeah, we lost you for a second. So
yeah, I'll say everyone was
backtrack a little bit. So, so you mentioned maybe you're reading about it, and then it kind of cut out after that.
So yeah, maybe you're reading about it, maybe you're taking classes, and just because you're unschooling or a self-directed learner doesn't mean you can't take classes. My kids have taken many classes and they've had many different teachers. But what happens is often you're doing and practicing that thing. And you have you can focus on that or many different things. So it allows you to be in the world with others that are in that world doing that thing or working in that area. So you see, oh, it's not just I'm doing this for a short mentorship period and then I move on to my next class and fill those hours. This is someone who has dedicated their life to this, and this is how it's played out. And this is what it looks like. Or this is someone else who's involved in this area, and these are the possibilities that are here. Or I'm doing this right now, and I want to continue getting better at it, and I see that it's going to take this time. So yeah, you're learning every day and living. You're already seeing how lifelong learning happens for everyone else in the world as well, because you're not in that kind of contained bubble as well. So I mean, that's one of the ways I think that lifelong learning happens, and how you see that as a learner, how you see that it's possible and continues as well.
I like that. I do. I have so many questions.
Yeah.
But So as you're speaking and you're talking about the why, the why, and letting the students' why drive the learning. What if you're a mother of or a parent of multiple kids who all have these very different whys? And how does that work in a day if we're trying to accommodate all of the students and let them dive into the things they want to dive into? Can you fit that all in one day of unschooling? How does that work? How do you balance that?
I think that's a great question. One, I think it really depends on the family and the learners. Everyone is different. Maybe some learners might, they might want something that looks like maybe they'll be connected with their computer for many hours and they don't need a lot of assistance or help with something. Maybe they're more independent. Getting help, often asking a mentor to help out as well. And depending on the ages, I think as well that sometimes kids are out of the house and they're not necessarily all together. It really depends on the family and the ages as well. If you have younger kids that are all excited about very different things, I think then it also comes into the time of, okay, let's have this conversation. We recognize that everyone's excited and curious, and that's fantastic, but there's only one or two of us, or maybe a grandparent, three of us, and we want to definitely support you and your curiosity, interests. Maybe you can give us ideas of how we can do that and work together. Or maybe as we're looking at, say, our calendar moving forward, how can everyone feel best accommodated and supported where you feel that you're getting what you need, but also I recognize that your brothers and sisters also need this too. So let's work together in this learning journey to see how we can all, and that in itself is a learning process as well, how we can be in this conversation together. This is important for us. So for example, Mondays, if there's an interest that crosses over and I found books or podcasts why don't we take some time where everyone can listen to the podcast? And if you don't want to, then, you can read a book or you can do something in the kitchen or things like that. Or maybe we take a day where we're out every Tuesday, we're out of the house and someone gets to choose the activity. And we share that through the month so that everyone gets a chance to see that recognized. I think so much of that also comes with that communication and what's going to work for the family, because it's going to look different for everybody as well. And as they get older, and especially as they've practiced their independence and supported in that will look different how they exercise it too. So, they're teens and they might be out of the house for much of the week. I think my son he's away from home for half the year, doing his mentorship. And so, he's not even around a lot of the time. My daughter, she's gotten older, things take her out. She has a job. She does, she's playing volleyball, things like that, where, in the end, they are not in home a lot with you in the end too. So those are some of the ways, but I think it also depends on the family and the dynamics, but communication is so important. And also it doesn't mean that you can't plan. Unschooling doesn't mean that you can't say, you know what, because we have this big family, maybe we need a schedule that is managed, but we're looking at the schedule, not with like a rigid hammer, but with flexibility and knowing that we can work with that and maybe find other ways that they can be supported, other classes, other mentors, maybe other teachers too.
Yes. Okay. That's a great answer to that question. I'm thinking too, my wheels just keep turning, but I've heard this come up as an argument when people, maybe an antagonist to the idea of unschooling, are like, well, what if my child never wants to learn math or never wants to learn literacy skills? What's your response to that? If it's unschooling and we're letting the student drive the learning, how does that work if they just don't have an interest in some of those skills that many would consider just basic skills that everybody should know?
That's a great question, and that gets asked often. So I think there's two things to distinguish as well. One is if a child is having difficulty because maybe they have, they need extra support or help because they just can't. Maybe there's something else going on when it comes to literacy, for example, that maybe it's an eye problem, maybe it's a hearing, there's different things as well, right? Maybe it's dyslexia, calcula, something that they need some support with. So it's also, I think, important to recognize where maybe your child needs some support too, and that has nothing to do with them. Maybe there is resistance there because maybe there's a bit of fear and misunderstanding. But at the other side, if you're not teaching them how to read, it's interesting how we think that a person will never learn literacy skills because they're not in a classroom doing specific things, and how actually there are so many cases time and time again of people have learned their literacy skills, reading and writing, in many different ways that doesn't look like a phonics book Monday morning at a specific time, a certain amount of hours logged in a week. Literacy, especially the word literacy, encompasses so much. It's not just reading and writing. It starts actually from infancy. When we are talking with our kids, when we're communicating, they're hearing our words, when we're reading out loud to them, when we are have emotion and touch and connection. So much literacy is really communicating and how we communicate to the world, how we understand and then respond back. So literacy encompasses not just the written word, but it's audible. There's so many differences with that as well. And learning to read and write, sometimes for, some learners, they see it as a necessity. In order to get to a goal, they begin to understand, especially as they get older, that I want to accomplish this, but I need to be able to read these words in order to do so. I want to know how to play this video game and no one's around right now. And I can do that if I can read what it's telling me and I can get to a higher level, then I have this motivation to learn how to read. And I'm going to find ways to do that or ask my parent to do that. Or there is other, having literacy introduced in the environment by reading aloud and showing that how we use it in our everyday life is actually, it's part of our world where it doesn't happen because it's introduced in school. It's just part of our daily life. And I think the difference is learning those literacy skills when you see that it's a part of daily life, not because it has to be at this time. So there's many different ways to build and learn those literacy skills, but you're not going to learn them just because you're being taught at this certain time. So for example, I have a friend whose son is unschooled. He went to school until I think he was 9. Intense reading programs, but she was like, he left school still not reading and writing. And he was in school. And so she stepped back and allowed him to explore and play. And she's unschooling. And he got to a point where he said, his big thing was money. He was like, I wanted to learn how to make money and do this and invest and build this. And I want to learn all these ways that I can do this. And he found out, he would watch on YouTube and different things like that. But then he found out that he needed to read things in order to advance in where he was. So he came to his mom and said, I want to get better at this, but I see that I need to be able to read this in order to do that, or I need to have a stronger understanding of reading than I do right now. So can you help me to do that? And he was 11 years old at that time. So, he was so motivated. And then once he started, and also, obviously his development was that farther along, he went with flying colors as well. When it comes to math is in our everyday, and it's the same. Just because it's not broken down into math class or formulas at this time doesn't necessarily mean that you are not going to be learning math at all. When you're cooking, when you're baking, when you're shopping, when you're doing measurement, when you're building, there's so many, when you're looking at nature and how it unfolds, it's actually all math, it's patterns. And the way that we look at it may not be a formula on the page, but it's actually, math is like a natural process as well. So, I have a friend, and she's been on my podcast before, Liana Francisco. We actually have another episode coming up. And she's also one of my admins in my club as well. She's a grown unschooler, and she talks about she never did a math class until she was 16 years old, like never did any math at all, didn't learn her times tables, nothing. And then she decided at 16, and she's never been to school. She wanted to go to college. And she realized for her to go to college, she needed to do this math exam. And she'd never done math at all. So she talked to her mom and they got a tutor, a math tutor. And so her math tutor worked with her once a week. And then she had homework through the week, and she did her math, all of her years of math within less than a year. I think it was 6 months. And then she was able to write the exam and she got in. She ended up getting her associate's degree. She has 2 masters, and yet she never learned traditional math before that time.
Here we go.
We're pausing
So
again.
yeah,
Understanding of how it
we're
works.
back. That's so cool. It keeps coming back to the why.
Yeah.
And that what's driving the learning. And that's one thing that we've seen with our own students is students coming in and having that feeling of, well, what's the purpose of this?
Mhm.
And when context can be provided, we see higher levels of success, because it's like, oh, this makes sense. This is why this applies to my everyday life. If the student can't see the application of something or the why behind learning something, it feels very meaningless and just something that you have to do, instead of something that, hey, I'm interested in this, or I can see how this helps my personal growth in my overall journey. And then they jump 2 feet in. So that's fascinating that that's something that, you find. And I really like that example that you gave of somebody who's actually been through the unschooling process, and then has obviously been successful, was able to go to college, have multiple degrees, and move on and do something really neat with their life. So I love that. That's a very cool story. So thanks for sharing that.
And what I thought was cool about the other story was then you have, someone who, this is what I want to do with my life. And then they're learning how to ask for help because they're recognizing the gaps in their learning, right? Oh, if I want to get here, I need to start here, and it's okay to ask for help. Like that's a huge life skill in and of itself, right? Because we as adults tend to be like, no, I've got this. I don't need to ask for help. And for the student to kind of come to that own conclusion, you said he was like 11 years old, right? Oh, hey, if I want to get here, I'm going to have to learn how to do this. There's so much power in that realization as well. I was like, oh, wow, look at that. An 11-year-old asking for help, recognizing within themselves, oh, hey, I lack this. I need to work on it. And I think that's the biggest real world application for them too, right? Like, oh, now I'm taking ownership of this because I need to be better at this if I want to get here, which I think is pretty powerful for a student.
That is lifelong learning.
Yeah, right.
That's what it is, right? Knowing that we're not going to know everything right now, but we absolutely can learn when we need to, or else ask and find out that information in order to do so. Absolutely.
For sure. I love that.
So I'm a little bit curious. We're talking about the why that's driving learning. What's your why? What got you started in homeschooling your own children? Because you mentioned you have a little bit of a background in education and some other things. So at what point in this whole process did you say, yes, this is what I'm going to do? Were you homeschooled as a child? Or did you go to traditional school? Can you walk us through a little bit of that process?
Yeah, I went to traditional school. My parents are very traditional. My parents are from 2 different countries. And so I think if you have a parent, many times if you have an immigrant parent, often traditional education is extremely important and high on the list. So that was my traditional upbringing as well. So I was never homeschooled. My husband was homeschooled though, until grade 8. His parents took him and his brother out of school and homeschooled him until he was in junior high school. We chose to homeschool our kids, honestly, because we wanted to go traveling. And we were at a point where our kids were young. We saw we needed to make a shift in our family life and our purpose of, when we started a family, we were going way far off the path of what we originally wanted to do. And, those, you get busy, right? You're working, you have careers, your kids, even they're young, you put them in junior kindergarten, you want them in the best programs and extracurricular activities. And they had all of the things, and we were, trying to get more and more, but in the end, we had no time for each other. And we recognized that that was something that was not aligning with our purpose for having a family. And so we decided to step back from those things and slow down, do less. And one of the ways that we wanted to, we'd always talked about traveling. My husband and I had traveled a lot. I traveled a lot as a kid with my parents. And we felt that that was something that we wanted to do. And it was important to give different perspectives. And also my family that lived in other countries, it would give them a chance to connect with that family, that side of the family as well. So my husband was the one who originally said, hey, we can homeschool them. We can travel, we can and you know what? And if it doesn't work out, we can always just come back home and do what we're doing. So at least we can try, and let's do it now before we wait till the perfect time that's never going to happen. So that's how we started, honestly. And we started homeschooling, and I did the traditional, we got up early, the kids had math at a certain time. I set the alarm on my phone. When it rang, we switched to phonics. Then when that rang, we switched to something else. But the one thing was that by lunchtime, the rest of the day was free. There was no plans. It was total play. We were at the beach or whatever, and it was completely open. And the things that happened was, one, the work that the school sent to finish out the year, we were done in like a month. And so I had all of this work that then I was like, the class is still moving along, but we are finished. And so that was one surprising thing. And the other part of it was that my kids were still learning. They were still they were even more curious. They were asking more questions because of those afternoons where it was open and we were playing, and they were at the beach, and they wanted to know why when we stayed late in the evening, this certain fish came up to the shore, but it never came when we were in the morning or any other time. What was it? Can we find out what it is? What does it eat? Why is it here at this time? What changes? Questions like that we were learning alongside each other, and they were more curious when they had that open space. So it was something that as we kept traveling, we just continued to allow for more space and questions and curiosity. And once we came back to Canada, we had the conversation as a family, and everybody, I didn't say it because I was loving it. And my kids had just said, we don't want to go back to school. We want to keep homeschooling. Can we do that? So we agreed, and we've just kind of taken it year by year. And that's how our path kind of slowly unfolded that way. So in a way, it wasn't intentional, but it was intentional. But it allowed us to solidify on that why. Really, for our family, our why, our purpose is, connection, love, self-efficacy, self-understanding and independence, and understanding that all of that is wrapped with our lifelong learning. So, an adventure.
I love that. That's awesome. And then, seeing the natural curiosity kick in, right? As they have that opportunity to explore instead of being tied to a classroom for, 6 to 8 hours a day. And then feeling too, I think the power of that is they can learn kind of at their own pace, right? They're not compared to their classmates. They're not, hey, you're behind, you should be here. It's more of a, how am I doing compared to where I was yesterday? It's less of that comparison game between your classmates, because that's kind of the traditional school model is, I remember I would get report cards with the ranking of this number out of this number of students.
Right.
Yeah. And it kind of put that pressure on I gotta keep being up here or I'm not good enough, but which is part of the reason why we don't rank our students, because we're it really is about where were you yesterday and where are you today? Are you seeing improvements? Are you seeing growth? Are you learning? And I think there's huge power in that when a student can kind of explore that without feeling the pressure of the comparison, right? Because that's just fueled in today's society with social media and all the things that kids are bombarded with. And so I think it's awesome that they have that space to just kind of learn and explore what they want to learn about.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to say too, because this is a question that comes up as well. And as the kids get older, I do think it's still an important conversation to keep having within your family. Again, going back to the why and purpose. And that because you are going to run into, my peers are my age group, they're doing this and they're asking, well, why aren't you doing this? Or, everyone is doing this. Why aren't you? Or, going to, we're looking for, I'd like to do this, and say an employer or a post-secondary, we're saying, well, we're used to everyone following this, but you haven't done this, so then I don't know where to place you, or I don't know what to do, kind of thing. If you're, how do you, if you've never been on the traditional path and then you want to, in some ways, enter a traditional path, or society traditionally, in some ways, how does that even fit in? So I think it also is still important to recognize that, again, going back to that lifelong learning, that even if maybe you haven't been on this path, you can still enter into it. You can still do those things. It is going to look a little bit different coming in. Maybe there's a few things you have to change and adjust, but you are still able to learn. You're not, just because you didn't do things at this certain time doesn't mean that it's lost to you forever. And especially now, with so much access and information at our fingertips, the possibilities are, there's so many possibilities of what we can do, what we can access, what we can learn, people that we can access as well. And also at the same time too, that it's, again, being able to ask for that help and those questions too.
That's key, isn't it?
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges that you face as a homeschooling parent or an unschooling parent in just your daily life, and maybe in like the bigger grand scheme of things? What are the challenges that pop up?
Well, you're still human, right? And you're still a parent, a mom or dad that, wants your kids to be able to have all the opportunities or chances that everyone else does. It's funny, I think you still have similar conversations to parents who have their kids in school, like, that, are we choosing the right path? All of those questions that come up. Are they going to be able to do these things? How can we help them to be able to have these opportunities? So, that always still comes up. But I also, as I get a chance, and I mean, I'm grateful that I get a chance to connect with so many parents in different walks of life. I realize that we all have those questions and those fears and doubts. And my friends who have kids in school have the same questions and fears and doubts as well. So I think that's something that still is a challenge as a parent and as a person as well. And then, there is that path, because we're not following that traditional path. Definitely that traditional path makes things easier because it's already well worn, right? Those things are already done and checked. So when people are looking at, when you're looking at something like, say, maybe a certain institution, post-secondary institution that are used to having all of these things checked off, sometimes it takes a bit more of an open mind or a conversation or an understanding, or maybe a bit more of a dogged determination to say, okay, look, I can explain it. We can take the time to show how this does reflect this, or, this is, just because it doesn't look this way, they still are at a certain place. So sometimes advocacy is a challenge. And sometimes maybe for someone who doesn't have a personality that is comfortable being an outspoken advocate, I'm not that personality. I am fine with advocating and really trying to, support others and my family in that way. But I think that is something that's going to just takes more time and effort. So yes, the traditional path makes things easier. And when you're not following the traditional path, there probably are going to be a bit more time and more conversations to be had because of that as well. So I would say that's probably a challenge, just because it's like, yay, we're unschooling, everything's perfect and it all falls into line, it's all going to work out in the end. I'm a very real idea that it's not all fairy dust. that sometimes there is more work that happens. Sometimes there is more effort that happens. Maybe something might take a little bit longer. Like my oldest right now, he decided that he does want to get his high school diploma, but he still wants to do it in a non-traditional way. But we had that conversation where he recognizes that it might just take him a little bit longer because he's also, working, and he also is, looking more into a certain area. He's also doing sports. He has all these other things happening where he doesn't want to be in school from 9 to 5. But if he wants this certain outcome, but he's not following this path, his path might just be a little bit longer to get there. So having that understanding in conversations is probably, it happens. It's a bit more of a challenge, but it's one of those things that we accept and are working with.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like there is a lot of support out there for those families that are homeschooling. I think COVID kind of shifted the attitude of homeschooling and unschooling, and this idea that, hey, parents can do this. And look, we are more connected to our children, and so I know there's a lot of like Facebook groups out there, local homeschool kind of communities where you can meet up with fellow parents, who, like you said, probably have similar questions to you about, hey, how do we navigate this? How can we help each other out and provide that sense of community, which then kind of gives that social interaction as well. And which I think is awesome that there's so much support out there for these families that are doing this. And I know you had mentioned that you're hosting a homeschool summit. And so can you tell us a little bit about that as a resource for parents out there too?
Yeah, absolutely. Every spring, this is our third year. So March 24th is how to be an awesome homeschooler this year. And really it's online, it's live, it's one day, and it's free to attend live. It's actually audio only. We host it on the Clubhouse app so that it can be audio only, so that if you want to go for a walk, if your kids are, you've got multiple kids and they're doing their different things and you want to just be able to listen while you're kind of around helping them, you can do that. It's easy to do that. We have a theme every year. This year, it's the powerful P's: purpose, persist, play. And, last year it was 3 R's. Resilience, it's not the reading, writing, arithmetic. It's now I'm like, oh my goodness, my mind just blanked on the other R's, but resilience is sticking out. Reclaim, resist, resilience were our 3 R's. Before vitamin C's was the year before that, which was connection, confidence, and calm. So this year it's powerful P's: purpose, persist, play. We have keynotes and workshops so purpose is Leah Bowden from Modern Miss Mason. Persist is Julie Bogart of Brave Writer. And play is Mr. Chaz. So it's different areas of parenting, alternative education, homeschooling. And then our workshops. Kelly Edwards, who is my co-founder of the summit, she is supporting neurodiversity in her workshop, and my workshop is in supporting self-directed teens. The way that we have this is, you come together, it's community. We do it on that app because it's live. You can ask questions live with the speakers and co-hosts. We also have a group chat along with that. So it's not like a webinar that you just watch, but it also offers information and a chance just to get your questions answered, but also hear from people who come from different backgrounds and have a ton of experience as well. So that's happening, howtobeanawesomehomschooler.com. And that's something we do every spring. So it's kind of like heading into your year, depending where you are in the world, gives you a little bit of insight and connection and information as well, and encouragement. So yeah. And then we have all the extras, like we do, if you do get the recordings, you get the PDFs. We do like a live coaching Q&A after post summit as well. We do a movie watch party. So, last year we did Class Dismissed, the homeschool documentary. It's always something around, alternative education or unique learning. I can't say which movie we're showing yet because I'm working on the leasing for that. So until that's finalized, but it's a great one. I'll say my family loves this movie, and it's a very unique individual. So, things like that as well, just to offer support, because I've been there. And Kelly, my co-founder of that summit, she's been there too, where we're like, am I the only one doing this? Am I really straight? Like, what about this? But what happens when my kids need this and we're not in this classroom? Or, how I want to hear stories from others and how it turned out for them as well. Like, what does it look at the end? The end part of this, how are these kids turning out? Things like that I know everybody has questions about. So yeah, I have that summit every spring, but March 24th. And if you miss it live, the recordings are available after the summit on the website.
I'll be tuning in. So
Good.
I'm a mom of twin 4-year-old girls.
And
And our family is considering all the options for education, including homeschooling. And obviously, we're a big proponent of alternative education. Angeli and I founded Mountain Point Academy on that premise of this is an alternative to your traditional school. And so my husband and I are just bouncing around all these ideas. And Robyn, I think you're going to be one of those resources that we look to as we're starting to just navigate that process and make some decisions for our family. So definitely be tuning in on the 24th.
Good.
Personally.
I'll watch out for you for sure.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, yeah. So where can people follow you? Where can they find you, Robyn? We'd love to include that in the show notes so that, like Sarah, other parents out there who want some resources, where can they find all the goods that you have to offer?
Well, the easiest is my podcast, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. So I'm in my 7th season. There's honestly so much information, resources on there, some fantastic interviews, and a bit of kind of my own sharing and process along the way. That's the best place. And that's on any podcast player or my website. You can find it, Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids, or go to imhomeschooling.com. And social media. Honey, I'm Homeschooling the Kids. You can reach out to me there, DM me on social media, or through my website, you can contact me. So those are the best places. But my podcast, take a listen. And then I always love feedback. When people say, I listened to this episode, but I was wondering, like, I heard this, but really, can you tell me more? Or, yeah, I was like, that piqued my interest, or yes, I agree, or no, I don't agree. So I have listeners from all over the world, and that's my favorite part, actually, is hearing from them and their experiences, whether they're in a place that has a lot of homeschoolers, whether they're creating something different like you guys, offering options, or whether they're in a place that's actually so interesting where they want something different, but it's against the law, or they've had to relocate because that's their only opportunity to change the dynamic of learning for their family. So it's one of those things where it gives me perspective that just because I have my life this way doesn't mean that it's necessarily very easy for others who then have to uproot everything in order to support their purpose, align with their purpose. So.
Yeah, that is so fascinating, and probably not something that everybody's aware of, that, hey, be grateful for the opportunities you do have, right? Because it might not be available in other places. So that's fascinating. And I love that your listeners provide feedback, and I think there is great value in that, because then we can provide, all podcasters, we can provide the content of what people want to hear and what they're interested in, so that we can just help spread the word about the non-traditional education opportunities that are out there for students to just really grow and expand and develop that lifelong love of learning. So thank you so much, Robyn, for coming on the podcast today and sharing all about unschooling and the awesome opportunities that it provides to students. And is there any other words of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with before we let you go?
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Really, I think again, it is important just to go back to your why, take the time to clarify what's important. And, that can look different for everyone. It doesn't have to be unschooling. It might not work for your family, and that's okay, but definitely take the chance to connect and understand the why, so that you can support and advocate for your family and your children in the ways that they uniquely need. And I think that's what's most important, that it doesn't have to look one way, that we actually do have chances and opportunities for it to look different and for it to fit your child as well.
Yes, I love that. Well, thanks again, Robyn. We really appreciate you taking the time to meet with us today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Robyn.
Thank you.